Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf instruction podcast that helps you take control of your game. Now, here's your host, the founder of Par Breakers Golf Academy and certified Golf Channel Swing Fix instructor, Bernard Sheridan.
Welcome to Breaking Par. I'm your host, Bernard Sheridan. Really glad you could be with us today. We have a great guest, and that is Chuck Evans, top 100 instructor. He's here to give us his insight into the game. So sit back and relax. And this is the video version of Breaking Par, the podcast. So we have Chuck Evans today. Chuck, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for having me, Bernard.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, there's you've been around for quite a while now in the golf industry, same as myself, but you've been, and I don't mean to say that about your age, but
okay.
but more about your experience and things that you've done in the world of golf instruction, which is aplenty. You're a top 100 instructor. You're a Golf Digest top instructor. You're the contributor of 5 Simple Keys. So there's a lot of different things that you have achieved in your career so far, and I'm sure there's still plenty that you would like to achieve. So, so how did you come upon getting involved with the 5 Simple Keys and developing that program?
Well, I mean, it was, myself, Dave Wedsick, Bob Koch was Medicus. I mean, we had been teaching this forever. And as we started looking back through, the history of golf and all these great players, we just noticed that there were certain things that they all seemed to do the same within an area. And those 5 areas were the 5 Simple Keys. So, I mean, my background was a lot of golfing machine, and while everything may not be 100% correct in there, there's certainly enough in there to build tour quality golf swings. So, my background in that, Dave's background, Dave and Eric and Bob, more of a stack and tilt type background. And so, but what we found was all these commonalities, and it didn't really matter whether you were teaching something called the golfing machine or stack and tilt or 1 plane, 2 plane or 8-step swing. It didn't matter what it was; they all seemed to fit within these commonalities. So that's how it evolved.
And these were things, of course, that you were always using in your instruction. It just so happened that you wanted to bring those things to the forefront so that people would greater understand that no matter what your swing style, you have to have these things happening in your swing.
Right. And I mean, the 5 Simple Keys, that's what it is. It's more of a swing style. 1 plane, 2 plane, stack and tilt, maybe, for lack of a better word, methodologies. But going back to say, I mean, it's just like natural golf. That is a methodology. But what happened is all of these fit within that realm. So, when we have coaches come to us that want to go through our certification or players asking about it, it doesn't really matter what methodology you adhere to or want to work with. It still falls all within that 5 Simple Keys. So we don't really care what your methodology is, as long as you look in these 5 areas and you prioritize based on these 5 keys on what can you do with the student right now. Which one of these keys can you do right now that most greatly affects the other keys that might need help?
Sure. So for our audience who's not familiar with that program, what are the 5 Simple Keys that you teach?
Yeah, well, the first one, I mean, we look in these 5 areas. We look and see for head movement. For the first one is steady head. Now, in our definition, steady head does not mean not moving. Okay, it can have a little translation back and forth. Some players go up and down. Biomechanics stuff shows us that the head moves about an inch in the backswing and then moves about an inch downward in the downswing. So for us, steady head doesn't mean absolutely still. And the second piece is having your pressure, or as golf instructors like to call it, weight forward. The best players in the world get anywhere from 70 to 90% of their pressure forward on their lead foot, lead hip, lead knee at impact, depending on the club. And the players that need the most help generally have about 50% or less on that lead foot.
Sure.
And then we have what's called an inline club shaft, which simply means the left arm and club shaft form one line at impact and not two lines. So, Jordan Spieth would be obviously a guy that gets away with the two-line impact because of his what we would call an arching left wrist, which looks like that, versus a bending left wrist, which looks like that. So, when they get that in line, that's all we refer to as an inline club shaft. The third thing would be, how you're controlling the sweet spot of the club. So we actually call that a diagonal sweet spot because the path of the club is swinging diagonally. We don't play golf on a vertical plane or a horizontal plane. And then the fifth thing would be controlling that club face. So the fifth one is what you see that the best, the better players, the best players in the world, that's the one that gives them problem is controlling the club face. If you look every Sunday coming down the stretch, players in the last group, the players that typically don't jump up and win will have trouble over curving their golf ball that day, which that's a club face issue related to their path, as we all know now. So those are the 5 areas. So we look in those areas, and we pick, okay, well, which one of these will have the greatest effect on helping the other ones?
Sure. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. So and those things too are if one is not there, it can kind of stop the other ones from being there too. Correct.
Correct. I mean, if you don't have, if your head's moving all over the place, it's hard to consistently control the left shoulder relationship to the golf ball. If you're throwing the club head in front of your hands, which means now you're not using the true loft of the club how it's designed, that can also change your contact point and once again your low point. So by having the pressure forward with the head pretty steady, that influences having the hands forward and the inline club shaft.
Sure, absolutely. Now when you kind of work with students, do you use technology at all in trying to find some of these things to quantify that, or to show the student that, hey, yeah, you are moving your weight forward. We want you to. I know that in a situation where it's maybe you're using 2D camera or something like that, and you videotape a player, it's kind of hard to see whether they're actually starting to change. How much of their weight are they really getting forward? Do you use anything to show players that?
We do. We use body track. We use 3D motion analysis. We use flight scope, and of course, we use high-speed cameras. And we use those to get some basic numbers. I mean, you can pretty much look at a 2D camera and see if a player is moving forward or not. All you have to do is mark it. Now, it won't tell you how much or the amount or the percentage, but you can see whether they're moving forward or not. You can see whether they have an inline club shaft or not. So there's a lot of things you still do with 2D. You don't necessarily have to have the highest technology on the planet to be able to see those things if you've been teaching for a while.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that because when you've been doing it for such a long time, these are things that your eyes are trained to look for under normal circumstances. If you have the technology, then you might be able to show a student easier what you are seeing as opposed to what they would see on videos. Sometimes because they don't have a trained eye, like yourself or like an instructor, then essentially when they look at it, you can say, "Well, see, you're moving this much," and that's kind of in the right direction. Whereas you can show them actually a percentage point on a body track or something like that.
Right.
Then they can say, "Oh, okay, now I really see that," and that's right away. I know that I have found that when I use technology in certain ways, I can show a percentage to the student, and they automatically get it. they say, okay, yeah, right, and then they can transfer that into a feeling,
Right.
and then they can actually start to make it happen because they're more of a feeling. With a lot of the students that you work with, do you try to transfer things into feelings for them, or do you find that everybody is different? I know that for me, a lot of students like feeling, and then there's a lot of students who like visual.
Right. Well, and you have to you have to know what kind of learner your student is. So, to me, there's no such thing as a field player. Actually, I had this discussion with a player the other day. He says, "Well, I'm a field player." I said, "Really? Well, take that club. I want you to go up here. Now, I want you." And I went up there and I moved it maybe a quarter of an inch. I go, "Do you feel a difference in that?" And they go, "No." Well, then you're not a field player. All right. So, but yes, we get them to look, and they'll say it'll be a tip off. They say, "Oh, I see that." Well, that tells me they're more of a visual learner. Or I feel that. Now it goes back to their bodies relating to a certain motion. Or I hear that. So that's kind of telling me what kind of learner they are. Once we put them, let's say, on the body track and we get them to feel the pressure, the next thing is, if you take the body track away, how do they feel that, right? Or how do they practice with that? So we might put a driveway marker up, as a bumper to get them to feel, that pressure going forward. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to do without the technology. The technology gives you the data, and it can allow the students to look, but sometimes they get so concerned with looking at those numbers that they forget everything else. So we put the golf club in their hand. We will set up parameters as far as a training aid or a drill, and that helps them feel the drill a little bit more, which translates to working on the numbers.
So when a player comes to you, is most of the lessons that they're doing with you on the lesson tee, or is there specific times where you're taking them off the lesson tee and maybe to a short game area, or to a putting green, or to actually getting out on the golf course and working on game improvement in that way?
Yeah, and it depends on what they want. Um, if they just want to work on hitting the driver, then we'll cover the driver. But they go through an analysis. First time we get a new player, they go through an assessment which takes about 2 hours. So they go through a physical assessment that lets us know what they can and can't do, and what their body actually wants to do versus what they're trying to do. We put them through a short game assessment. We put them through a full swing assessment. We get all of their numbers with all the technology, and that's our baselines, and that's where we start. And then, depending on their goal, out of all those numbers, we create their plan for them. And then they need to follow that plan, and we set up certain training parameters. We do what's called supervised practice for all of our long-term players. And we typically don't do a lot of one-off lessons. I personally don't think those work very well. So we do a lot of 3, 6, 9, and 12-month programs. And those programs, they get access to our indoor training facility. We have 3 bays indoors. At Tiffany Greens, we have 2 bays at Staley Farms, which we control, have the instruction there too. And we have a teaching building with 2 bays out at Canyon Farms. So we have the ability to keep people inside during bad weather, during the winter. And that's what we like to do in the wintertime, is do all the hard work. So when springtime comes, they just play golf. And all we have to do is work more on the on-course, the mental game, and the scoring. And we do a ton of that in the springtime.
Sure. So then most of your mechanics, or things that you're working on, positions, or like, let's say, swing bottom, or
Right.
straight plane line, or any of those things, they're more in the off season, where they can work on drills and do things like that to try to make those things soak into their muscle memory. And then once the weather breaks, now it's more the real things that they're facing on a regular basis.
Right. And again, that's why we use the winter. We use that, a lot of time to work on strength and mobility and stability, mechanical issues. That's when we're working on all those things. But then again, when the spring comes, we quit we quit working on the mechanical things unless there's a severe breakdown we need to work on, and we focus more on the scoring end of it and the course management end.
Sure. So, and I know that you said that you have programs that are like 3, 6, what was it, 3, 6, 9, and 12?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that too, for a lot of our listeners, when you talked about the one-off, there's so many people who believe that they can come in and take a golf lesson, one golf lesson, and then try to fix a problem. Most of them are players who say, oh, I hit my irons great, but I just, I keep losing my drives. I'm not very good with my driver. I just want to come in and take a driver lesson, fix my driver before the season. So, and I believe, as you do, that, it's almost impossible to fix somebody in one lesson. If we could, we would probably all live in Hawaii and charge about $1,500 a lesson, because that's really the value that it would be worth, and people will be willing to travel that distance, or unless they lived in Hawaii, to take that one lesson. So it's definitely a process, and depending upon, I guess, what they're trying to achieve would be determined as to, or maybe what their budget is, would be determined as to which one of those programs they would take with you, correct?
Right. I mean, like I said, when we do our initial meeting with a new player, in addition to the assessments, we find out what their goals are, their commitment levels. I mean, obviously, if you have, Mr. and Mrs. Haverkamp show up to your lesson tee, and they haven't played golf in 25 years, and they have a tournament, their company tournament they're playing in on Friday, and today's Wednesday, they're not going to, they're just not going to be good.
It's amazing, too, how those things happen, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. So you'll give them some, you give them some things that will help them.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not going to make them the player they want to be. So, our main goal as instructors is to make the player as good as they want to be and help them reach their goals. It's not about how good we want them to be. So, with our programs, we see our players each and every week, whether it's a private session or whether it's a group coaching session. So they need to be there every single week. And that, because how many lessons have we all given over the period of our lifetime? You give somebody a half hour or an hour lesson. In fact, I don't even do those anymore. But you give them a lesson, and then you don't see them for a month. They come back, and you say, well, what have you been working on? Well, I haven't had time to practice. Well, we start all over again. So it's actually a waste of their time and money.
Yep.
Right? Because we always have to go over the same things. And the way that we process it, we see these people every week. So when we have their private session, the next thing that happens is when we see them in the coaching session, the next week, it's a week. We know, and we can look at in the coaching session and make sure they're working on whatever it is that we gave them in the last private session.
Sure. So, in your coaching session is with a group of students, then, correct? Where it's almost like a supervised practice type session, and then you're working on, and then you're covering different things. When you're doing that, are most of the players that you're working with the same level, or are they kind of all different levels?
They're all different levels.
Okay.
So what we have in that session is, they are working on whatever it was we worked on in their last private lesson. Now we have other sessions that are structured in our coaching sessions. The practice sessions is they're practicing and working on hopefully what we just worked on in the private.
Sure.
The coaching sessions is we have certain things set up, and as they complete each station, they move to the next station.
Sure. So that people who are out there who are trying to get better and looking for an instructor, these are the type of programs or things that they should look for when they're trying to make a decision as to who to choose, as not just like, say, just private lessons, one-on-one things, that maybe there's supervised practice sessions, there's coaching sessions, there's on-course playing sessions, there's all these different types of things available to the student that they can really learn better, as opposed to just like this one-on-one stuff. And I'm finding too that a lot of professionals who instruct, they're trying to get more into these type of sessions because they find it's more beneficial for their students.
Right. And again, it's from our standpoint, the instructor standpoint. Our job again is to help the student get better. So, what is the best ways that we can do that? The best ways we can do that is to spend more time with them, but to spend more time with them in the old models is not necessarily the most economic way for the student to do that.
Sure.
So, by incorporating one-on private sessions with organized group sessions, it's much more affordable and it keeps us more engaged with our students.
So when you do that, when you set a student up in a program like that, is it like a monthly fee that they pay and then they get a certain amount of private instruction and they get a certain amount of group instruction or a certain amount of coaching instruction, and then when they do that, it's totally up to them as to how they get their money's worth, I guess. So in other words, like if let's say they don't show up for a coaching program 1 week, and let's say you have coaching programs twice a week, and they can't show up, then are they able to make it up, or is that on them, or things like that? So, and these are other things that I'm trying to think of when students are going to these programs. What they know is kind of like part of what they should be doing,
Right.
as opposed to what they expect you to give them, and vice versa.
Well, so all the players that come into our coaching programs, our 3, 6, 9, and 12s, they're all told up front what's expected from them, what they need to expect from us. We create online solutions for them, so things are uploaded and they can print down a ton of stuff to put into their workbooks or playbooks, as Sean Humphreys calls them. So they're constantly given data to put in their books to make those books more expansive and more personalized to them. So we're always doing that, and we give them the schedules, and they can come to as many of these supervised practice programs as they want, but it's up to them to schedule those.
Okay.
So, we don't babysit them at all. It's up to them to schedule their appointments. Then we use online scheduling through USchedule.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do here too. That's a great program.
So they go up and they have to create that stuff. And occasionally with some of our juniors, we have to get on them a little bit because I had 2 last week. We're supposed to see them every week. I hadn't seen them in a month. They both show up with swings they've never had in 3 years. I don't know where those came from. Right? Well, I've been practicing. Well, no, you might have been practicing, but it's not the correct thing that we were practicing.
Right.
So, they got a little butt chewing and, had a conversation with the parents. But, that's why we do this every week, so we can keep track and stay on top of it so they don't deviate off the path. Because once they deviate, now we got to start, it's such a hard process to get them back on track again. If you see them every week, you can keep track and make them stay focused easily.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that. I find too that with a lot of my students, if they get off track, or if they're practicing things that their interpretation of what you said,
Right.
and then it might be a little bit deviated, and now they're starting to move further away from their goal. Then, as opposed to if they have the opportunity to practice stuff and for you to sneak a peek at it
Right.
in a coaching session, then they can kind of stay on the right path, and as opposed to now coming back and they, like you said earlier in our session today, how it's really like they're wasting their money. I mean, they're just doing the same thing that they did before, and it's like we're just rehashing the same old stuff.
Right.
Which is not very beneficial to them.
No. So when we do the coaching sessions, they have their drill stations set up. Once they complete one of the stations, they move to the next, and then we'll we'll mix everything in try to have random and block practices as well. We don't want them standing on the range and just beating golf balls. That just doesn't work, especially when you just keep hitting it to the same target over and over and over. So we try to put them in game situations. When we go out on the golf course, we won't discuss the hole until after they hit their shot. And then we'll talk about, okay, this is how the hole's set up. This is what the architect wants you to do, okay, or how the hole's designed. And actually hit their shots, and we'll have them hit different shots. All right, now, which one of these shots has the highest chance of success? Well, that's probably the shot you should be hitting. You should not be hitting the one that has the lowest chance of success. So we'll put them in different situations and then let them think it out, hit the shot that they choose, and then we'll go back and we'll ask them why they chose that shot, and we'll have them hit a different variety of shots. So if their mind is thinking, which shot should I use? Which shot has the highest success probability?
Sure, or what shot is the best for the situation that I'm in at this moment and the conditions that I'm under. Sometimes a flop shot, sometimes a knockdown shot, depending upon the situation. Sometimes a draw, sometimes a fade, depending upon pin position. There's so many different choices, and then really what fits their natural tendencies that they're going to be able to be mostly successful more often.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to give you an example, years ago up in Portland, Oregon, it was the last time I actually did a U.S. Open qualifier, and there were 4 guys from the UNLV golf team. And that day, it was July. The wind, the rain was horizontal. That's how hard it was blowing in the wind. And so having some experience, I hit a lot of real low spinning knockdown wedges that day. The guys at UNLV were all hitting the same shot, trying to hit high flop shots from anywhere and everywhere. They didn't play very well that day. And one of the things that kids like to do is hit the big old high flop shot. 9 out of 10 times that should not be the choice of shot. There's virtually never a reason to hit that shot, because unless you hit it perfectly, as you well know, a well-bladed flop shot goes as good as a good driver on some days. So that's not a high probability shot. So again, you look at all the options and you pick the one that gives you the best option and the highest success ratio.
Sure. No, I totally agree. I'm a huge advocate of keeping the ball, especially when you're around the green, keeping the ball as close to the ground as possible, because you can control the distance and what the ball does so much better. On top of which, if you're dealing with elements, you're not going to be really having to have those forces have a great influence on the shot. And the only time that I actually try to get my students to use a flop shot is if they have to carry a hazard, because they don't have a choice. They got to get the ball well in the air to carry a pond or a sand bunker or something of that, or a lot of rough, something of that nature. And then they end up thinking about it a little bit differently. But I agree with you that a lot of younger players, they love to see, they love to try to pretend they're playing basketball. Almost. They're trying to swish it, and it doesn't always work out to their advantage.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing that we like to do is part of their process, especially for our tournament players, we go through and we take them on the course. We show them how to chart a green, how to pick their lines off the tee and into the green, what clubs to hit. So we always do this like pre-tournament. That's their tournament process, is let's get all our charting done. And then we have a post-tournament process. And we talk about, okay, what things could we have done better? What things did we do good? Here's the areas we need to work on. So we always do a post and a pre as far as the tournament's done. And again, it's up to them to get that work done. They need to show us how they charted the greens, because we show them how to do it. They need to show us how they pick their lines and their approach shots, what clubs to hit. And so the better they get at doing that, then now they're ready to go out. Just like we got a bunch of kids today playing in a high school tournament. And I had one of them last night, and I said, well, have you done your work as far as your, you're charting your course and your greens? Well, I played the course a bunch of times. I go, so what happens if they change the hole from last year? What happens if the greens are different? I mean, you still need to chart the greens. You still need to plot the course. I said, so what are you going to hit on all the par fours and par fives? He goes, I'm going to hit driver. I go, why? You don't need to hit driver. So it's just part of the ongoing process, and you have to stay on top of them because, there's so much information out there. It's easy to get overwhelmed as a player. It's also easy to get overwhelmed as a teacher to see all the information that's now available out on the internet. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. So how do you decipher, what's good and not good?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that too. I mean, I say that to my students all the time, and I said, once you're a little bit more knowledgeable about understanding and to get back to the 5 simple keys that you spoke of, I mean, are these things being addressed in what you're looking at? So there is so much information out there. And like you said, some of it is really good, some of it is not so good. So once you start to understand these things a little bit better, you can kind of start to disseminate what really is good information and what information you should kind of take with a grain of salt or just kind of discard. Because of course, as golfers, and we all know this, there's always somebody who wants to tell them what they're doing wrong or how they're doing it or how they should fix it or what they think they should be doing, and how can they kind of either say, hey, that's a great idea and that's some good information, or because there's so many times that when players I think are having trouble with their game, they're going to try anything to try to get better. And sometimes that can be extremely detrimental because now they're trying things that actually send them off in the wrong direction. So educating themselves more often about things that are specifically have to happen in the golf swing, and does this information parallel that? So in other words, it takes a little bit of homework if you want to be a really good player, not just natural ability. And it takes some studying, and it takes some commitment, and it takes some time to get better and to get to be to a point where you actually can shoot in single digit or be an average 80s player, which is, not that easy to do without putting your time in, putting your work in. But that's like it is in anything in life. You got to work hard if you want to be good at something, no matter what it is. Some of us are fortunate to have natural talent and are able to be pretty good at things. But if you're that type of a player, that's what I love about golf. You always want to get better. You're going to have new goals. So then you have to study those things and learn those things and go to guys like yourself who have all that knowledge, who you can say to them, what do you think about this? And what should I be thinking about? Or if they see information that maybe you didn't give them, they should maybe, if they're working with you, maybe run it by you and say, Chuck, what do you think about this? Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? As opposed to just trying it themselves. I know that I always try to get my students to, I say, hey, it's great to read all these magazines. It's great to get all this information. And if you're going to try something, that's great, wonderful. I want you to try new things. But if you could run it by me just in an email or a text or something, I'll be happy to say, yeah, go ahead, give that a shot. Or, you know what, I don't think that's really going to be, the right thing for you to work on right now. You might want to steer away from that. And then when we're together, then maybe we can look at that and we can see whether it's going to be right for you or not. How do you feel about that?
Well, from the assessments of things that we do, we pretty much have their plan outlined. Now, there are 100 ways to say the same thing, 100 different ways to do that.
Yeah.
If it's just a different way of saying the same thing, I don't have a problem with that. But when I'm going to give you an example, one of the members yesterday, he goes, I got some of my old tapes out, looking at some of these old golf instructional tapes by other, pros. I read all these articles. He goes, I'm just confused. And I go, well, you're confused because none of it relates to you. You have a way that's the best way for you to do this. And if you deviate from that best way, all you're going to do is fail. Now, there are multiple ways to do what you're trying to do, but they all have to stay within that realm, of trying to get you to do it, whatever that piece is. But when you go through something that's so far off what you're trying to do, then all that does is just make you go backwards. It doesn't make you move forward at all. So if we haven't covered it, and it's all in the assessment, and again, there's ranges within all these 5 keys, but they're still the keys. So it doesn't matter how you do it if you accomplish that key. But something that would take you completely away from that is not a good thing.
Sure. Absolutely. So for students who want to work with you, for our listeners who want to know how to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that, Chuck?
Well, just go to the website, chuckevansgolf.com. You can read about all of our instructors there. We have a great instructional staff. I mean, Brendan Cooper, extremely talented teacher. We work together at one of our locations out at Tiffany. Then we have Alex Pisano at Drum Farm. We have Tony Trace out at Canyon Farms, and Karen Davis out at Canyon Farms. And Brendan and I also spend time between Staley Farms. So that all that information is on the website, chuckevansgolf.com, or you can send me an email, chuck@chuckevansgolf.com.
That's great. So there's one thing that I just want to touch base on that I've seen on social media lately with you, and that I think is kind of neat. And I think it's that one of your students came in with a T-shirt that said "Get Chucked Up," and
exactly.
and I thought that was really clever. And now are you starting to produce these T-shirts, these "Get Chucked Up" T-shirts?
Well, we have them through Teespring. You could actually find the link to that, not on the website, but on the social media. And what it was is one of the members just started saying, he said, man, I got chucked today, So he printed these T-shirts up, and he printed about 20 of them up, and they were gone like the first 5 minutes he walked into the pro shop with them. So now there's a lot of other people that want them. So I said, well, Mike, instead of printing those, let's just do it through Teespring. They can order it directly through there. So, but it's been a lot of fun. So, and that's why I posted. I go, well, if they're hitting it good, it's going to have one meaning. If they're hitting it bad, I guess it's going to have another meaning.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So, but hey, look, you know what they say about press. It's if they're talking about you, it's a good thing. So, right. But I know that all the things that we hear about you, Chuck, are all fine things, and I wish you continued success. You have a tremendous amount of it, and it's because you do a great job of what you do, and we're so glad that you had the opportunity to share it with us today.
Well, thanks, Bernard. I appreciate being on.
All right, so what we always say here on Breaking Par and Parting is until we meet again, try to keep it in the short grass. Take care.